Good evening, everybody. This is Source Booksellers. I'm Janet Jones, the owner and operator member of Source Booksellers, and we are again having our Friday night date night with our virtual author talk. We have been delighted to meet authors in many different ways, and our new special time, as I like to call it, is allowing us to meet authors and to have them talk about their works across many miles. I like to call this the magic of the 21st century, that we can talk to people from far away and from nearby as well. So tonight we have, I need to say to you that Source Booksellers is a unique niche of nonfiction books. We've been selling books here in Detroit, Midtown, for 18 years, but we've been in business in Detroit for 30 years. This is our 30th year of book selling in Detroit. So we are trying to embrace the many different avenues of activity around books and book selling. And when we were at the Winter Institute of American Booksellers Association this past January, we were delighted to meet Andre Perry, who is our guest this evening. Andre Perry is out there in Iowa, and he has written a book called Some of Us Are Very Hungry. So, Andre, I'd like you to say a little bit about how you came to write the book, and what was your intention.
This book began as, I would say, disparate or non-connected essays where I was really trying to explore how it is in our youth, and by youth I mean maybe in your early 20s to your 30s, how you begin to put together the identity with which you're going to move through the world, and how you begin to truly understand the deep roots of your identity, all the things that come together of your heritage, and then at the same time trying to actually really figure out what the world is about, how it sees you, and how you might find a place in it. And so I started writing a series of essays, and I didn't know they were going to be connected quite yet. And over time, I started to see that through line of, returning to these questions about how do you have an identity in this world, which is a volatile world, and actually understand your history. And if you're an American, really understanding American history, and then how you can push forward and be a citizen to exist in that world. And I started to see that through line popping up in these essays in different ways. And that was a couple of years ago. And from there, I, put together a full manuscript and, rewrote it a few times and started to really see the narrative that was connecting all of the essays come together, and, lost some material, brought some new material into it. And that's what got us to having the book that we have today.
Great. I want to go back to that, but first, can you give us a little bit about where are your roots? How did you arrive in Iowa, if you did arrive, and a little bit about your background that brought you to writing? It stopped.
So originally from Washington D.C. So I'm an East Coast raised kid, and D.C. that's my my original home where I'm from. And then I lived in California, in San Francisco for several years. I was just talking about my roots a little bit. I was I was saying I was from D.C., born and raised, and then lived in San Francisco, and then came to live in Iowa City. And so at this point, I've been living in the Midwest for almost 15 years, and I also consider it my home now. And I really do have a home in Iowa, but I also love I think the whole collection of richness that is the Midwest, from here to Illinois to Missouri to Michigan. All of these different communities, I feel, have richness as well as just like a strength, and really speak to me in like the heart of America and our spirit in ways that I think have helped me as I've grown older and like kind of grown into myself. Of course, I'm always going to have love for DC and going back, to my early roots, and I do love the West Coast, but definitely now a Midwesterner. Came here for school but have stayed here just to grow up and just become a better person.
I really like that because not too often do we hear about the middle of the country, and we have maybe three middles to the country. We're in the Great Lakes region, which is another kind of a region geographically, as well as the weather, as well as the scene. So the Great Lakes region is a special kind of region because of the water. And we're surrounded by water. Michigan floats in
I
water,
did it on the Chromebook.
unlike the middle of the country, which is the Midwest, and then the mountain states. That's a whole nother region. So I really like hearing you talk about uh, really falling in love and being joyful about being in these parts of the country. So
I'll let
thank you
yeah,
very much for that. And now we've had our third person really join us. So I'm going to fly away and let the two of you talk to each other. Andre,
uh,
thank you so much for being here. It's good to see your face again. Last time
yeah.
we were
Indeed.
over dinner last time.
When this book came out, I did go back to San Francisco, and I went right before the book came out, and then I went back right after it came out to do some events. And that was actually the first time I had returned to the Bay Area in quite a while. And I have family out there. I've got friends out there, and it was interesting to return to it and just see how quickly the community can change, or how quickly a community or a series of communities can change. And so it was interesting. It was both. I can remember the place that I had spent so long in, but at the same time disoriented by how quickly some of
Yeah.
its patterns had shifted. So
Even from the time, like you said, from the visit back after you moved and went to grad school and you went back for a visit, and then from that time to releasing your book and going for the tour, it just drastically constantly changing, huh?
yeah, I mean, and that's what, I think San Francisco is. That's part of what California is. But it's also it reminds you, or like makes you ask, like, what are the things, because there should be progress, right, in any town or any city, but what are the things that you must maintain within your communities in a city, and what are the things that you leave up to be changed, and it's always a question that we're having as neighbors and citizens wherever we live. So it made me really think about that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I am attracted to different Midwestern big cities, whether it's a Chicago or Detroit or a smaller city
Mhm.
like where I live in Iowa City, or like a Madison, because I feel like there's a little bit, maybe not control, but there's a little bit more voice in the citizens. Even when we don't have all the voice, we got a little bit more than we might on the coast in terms of making the changes that, or preserving the culture that we'd like to see.
Some of us are very hungry now. Let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit about the book. Yep.
And what was your goal? Like what was your hopes with releasing your essays?
Um, well, I think this book was my first attempt. I've been writing a lot, essays and stories, but this is kind of like the first collection, or the first full length work. Um, I'm just trying to like get closer to putting the truth on the page, of trying to discern honesty about what my character is about, honesty about particularly this land that we live on in America, and
Hmm.
understanding what are the elements that are making up the society that sometimes bring us joy and also can bring us great grief. I want to get to the bottom of that. And part of it, I think, is also getting to the bottom of myself, how I've been affected by it, how I've been traumatized by it, how I've brought trauma into it, and just trying to figure out what that complex picture looks like. So this was like that first step, and I'm hoping to get deeper on the next one. I can read a short section, and then we can just jump from there. That we're in the midst of a crisis is now well understood. The new president had said early at the inauguration to nearly 2 million people in Washington, D.C. The economic crisis clawed at the nation's confidence. The Great Recession loomed. It was Inauguration Day 2009, and we were in Iowa City. The race had started in Iowa the previous year with the primary caucus. Obama secured a victory in that first essential contest, and many Iowans took pride in the they launched his pursuit of the presidency. It was late now, and we were in the bar. Ethan and Jeffrey practiced lines for their play, and I was closing down the back. I washed pint glasses and scrubbed surfaces, lifted stools, and turned them upside down on top of the bar. Ethan leaned into Jeffrey, who was much shorter, and said, "You're almost there. Now say it like it's natural." Ethan was playing Miles Davis, and Jeffrey was John Coltrane. The play was scheduled to open in a few days in a small black box theater on campus. We would be there tucked into our seats, watching our friends succeed. Jeffrey wasn't even an actor. He was an undergraduate writer who read books and drank too much. Ethan had failed to find enough Black actors in Iowa City to act in his play about the life of Miles Davis. When he was casting a couple of months earlier, come up to me in the bar laughing, "Dre, we got to find some brothers, or this is going to be a one-man show." Becca walked toward us from the front bar. We're still open and rowdy. She stumbled into us and wrapped her arms around Ethan and me, "My two favorite Black people in Iowa City," she said, looking up at us through her red bangs. Jeffrey swayed in the background, clenching his fists, looking down at his shoes, trying to hold on to his character. "It's messed up," I said. "It's inauguration day, and all of the Black people are hanging out in the back of the bar." We laughed, and Becca walked past us to the back room. I fed the fish and turned off the lights. Up front, people were less noisy now. The bar had closed, and it was the after-hours crew. I walked to the front, poured a beer, and took a seat at a stool. The warm lights behind the bar illuminated the bottles of whiskey, vodka, gin. I knew I should head home and write, but I decided to indulge the evening with old friends. The ritual began with a neat shot of Tullamore Dew. Ethan spoke with reverence for August Wilson, his favorite playwright. He slapped his hand on the bar, his voice heavy with experience and hope, and said, "Damn, we got to get out there and make something good." By there, he meant the world. I hugged him. He laughed and looked at Becca and pointed for another round of whiskey. Ethan had grown up in Chicago. He wore that legacy proudly, though he had left the city to go to college. He said it had been a necessary step, an escape. He loved his home, the Bears, the White Sox, and the South Side, and he also understood the value of leaving all of that behind. Chicago had borne out so many children stripped of possibility and privilege, and Ethan honored the rare luck and determination that had helped him evade a less fortunate path. My mother had also grown up in Chicago. Her mother had extradited them from Jim Crow, Texas, when she was 8 years old in the 1950s. Other members of their family had relocated to Chicago much earlier, part of the robust migration that witnessed the city's Black population increase from 40,000 in 1910 to almost 300,000 by 1940. Red lines had determined my family's geographical fate. Through racially motivated covenant laws, Chicago had infamously constructed a Black belt that limited its Black population to specific neighborhoods. My mother lived in Bronzeville. Like Ethan, she loved Chicago and the rich spirit of her neighborhood, despite the subtler racism of Northern segregation. And yet, she would also escape in order to find her success. She would seek opportunity elsewhere. Moving beyond the city's imposed limitations for Black people, she would move from one kind of isolation to another.
Oh, thank you. Um, I'm curious, why did you choose to read that excerpt?
I was just like, it's Friday. I'm feeling like, we were talking about the Midwest. I'm feeling the Midwest. I'm
Yeah.
feeling Iowa. I'm feeling Illinois. I'm feeling Michigan. So I was like,
Okay.
I just had to bring it back home. That's all.
Okay, so also I'm just gonna hit on a couple of things in that. So like you said, they had an area that they called the Black Belt. Detroit had an area that was called the Black Bottom, where it was good for Black people. They had their businesses and homes, but the minute they were ready to build I-75, they cut through it. And of course, the people who were, Black Bottom were displaced elsewhere. So like you said, every big city has those areas where they redline, and it still goes on today. But like you said, your mom was able to get out for her success. And do you feel like you got out for your success, you wouldn't be the success that you are in a different area?
You know, I've had a lot of fortunate turns, and so I'm grateful for that. But I feel, you know, wherever we are, we're still fighting for that, like that fair shake at just like to live a normal life, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm like at once I'm both grateful, feel like, you know, the fight is still alive, you know?
I'm curious as to, in the book, 2 words you changed. So instead of saying the N word, you said brothers. When Ethan, he said we gotta get some brothers for the play. But in the
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
you did use the word. And then instead of saying the F word, you said that's messed up. Like, are you scaling down for a PG crowd? Are you unsure of how it will sound being received from you for you to say nigga and fucked up? Or do
I
you?
feel like when I'm in a live audience, it's
Mhm.
one thing because like you're developing like a little miniature community within the people who are there.
Yeah.
But like when you start going online in the world, it's like you don't even know what like
Who's
like
out
where everyone's
there?
coming from.
Yeah.
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 So, you know, there's something about the live performance, whether it's, you know, literature or theater or music. We're just when you're in that room with those other people, you create the code within that space and you move forward together through it.
Right. So I'm curious because I wrote that down. I love, love, love. I love, love, love Kendrick Lamar. And so did you see him in concert, and then did he actually not bleep out or no?
Yeah, he certainly did. And it was actually interesting because, you know, that event happened or that incident happened. And then he was at a concert. I can't remember which town it was in. I can't remember if it was like Minneapolis or Chicago. And he invited someone on stage to sing with him. And it was like a big, like an arena like
Yeah.
concert. And the woman was white and she was singing along with the words and she hit the N word. And Kendrick was like, wait, like we got to, he like stopped the concert. And he was like, look, I mean, he was actually like really kind about it, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he didn't have to be, right? You know, so like he was
Well,
really
no,
kind. He was like, this is
that's
something we can't do.
yeah, that's what I want to know. Do we have to be kind about it or not? Like in the part with Simon, the same guy at the Foxhead restaurant
Yeah.
where he's relaxed, he's at peace, and then he drops the N word about the jazz musicians, and you were upset. You felt like I should say something, but I just say F you and exit. Whereas fast forward to when he did it in front of Simon, Simon wasn't as kind about it. So that's like you said, that's the ongoing thing that we just have to not, you know, let it beat us up and weigh us down. But we just have to, I guess, each incident, you think, handle it when it comes.
I mean, we can only be we can only be who we are on that day, right? You know? So, you know, I don't know if I have an answer.
The Heart of Darkness.
Yeah.
Can we just talk about that for a minute? So I want to know, did you read Heart of Darkness yourself? Did you read uh, a Choose essay about it? Or like, how did you get your feelings that Heart of Darkness being the name of the coffee was racist, being called a nigger?
Yeah, I read Heart of Darkness I've read it in high school. Like, I mean, and that's going back even for me. So, um, and the reason I knew Heart of Darkness is because it was the film Apocalypse Now was based on Heart of Darkness. Like, and
Yeah, they
it's
made
the
that in
true history of the whole
79.
story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I seen the film when I was a kid, and then I read it in high school, and so I was attracted to it. And then I'd read more of Conrad, and particularly like Lord Jim and some of his other stuff he had put out. And I actually think he's actually, I mean, he's relevant because he is critical to some degree of the systems that the British or, you know, the Dutch or the Belgians had imposed upon different regions of Africa, and
Yeah.
then, you know, regions of Asia, in terms of, you know, coming in and just extracting the resources and treating the people really badly. And I think that criticism was, especially at the time that he was writing it, was like
Yeah.
pretty revelatory and revolutionary maybe. But at the same time, he was capable of being racist and, you know, demeaning the people who he was even, you know, trying to uplift in some ways. And I think some of his depictions of Black and brown people and a lot of his literature was like not great. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to, like, I don't know, to think about the complexity that some of the things he said, or, you know, some of the narratives he tried to get out of his work were, I think, positive and useful critiques of how we should or should not, you know, be citizens in the world. And at the
Yeah.
same time, he could also be degrading the citizens who he's trying to uplift. You know, I think that's interesting, and I think that's super applicable to where we live.
Yeah.
You know,
I was gonna say
because it's happening
it's
every
like
day.
it's okay. So I just was curious because, like you said, so you said something to the manager, and they changed it. Then you saw online the actual coffee company who brewed it. Do we go the next step and reach out to them and say, "Hey, why'd you make this brew? Talking about it's a jungly flavor and it's rich and dark," or do we leave it at that? Just like with the drunk guy. Do we, after Simon beat him up, do we tell the managers at the establishment, you know, you got this guy in here who offends all of the Black people? Like, how far do we take our fight once you make one step? Like,
These are hard questions, and I appreciate them, because it's
okay.
what we need to be thinking about, you know, on a daily basis. On one side, you know, if I engage someone who is in my community, in my town, and is not is being racist or sexist or whatever it is, then I think it's on me to find the way in which I can confront that and try to make it better. Because, like, this is where I live, right? And this is where all of my people are, and we gotta just make our places better. If it's the coffee company, you know, that's in California on the West Coast,
Yeah.
I mean, then I think we're on like a bigger strategic level, which is like, how do we get more Black and brown people in the coffee world? You know,
Yeah.
like we need to find the experts and elevate them. And not that I was a part of it, but I've seen it, like, even since that time when
Oh,
I
yeah.
talked to the managers,
That's been
like,
some years, right? That's what I wanted to, yeah. I know it's been some years. Like you said, these are questions that we should be thinking about. And I know you've evolved so much more from some of these essays are older. Like, what's the most recent is probably what, 2016 or?
yeah, like, what is it? We're in 2020. So I think the last things I wrote were probably a year and a half or so ago. Yeah.
Okay. So who are some of your favorite writers? I know in your book you were talking a little bit Toni Morrison at the beginning.
Well, definitely Tony. And then, you know, James Baldwin is just key, has been key for me. And I took a path to Baldwin, you know, the same class that I read Heart of Darkness in when I was in high school. We also read Uncle Tom's Children, which was a collection of short stories by Richard Wright, which I'd
Oh,
read Richard Wright before, but that was the first time that I, like, actually, I think I was awake and like really got it. And so that kind of led me eventually to Baldwin, who's obviously different, but that was the path. And then Nella Larson, also, you know, from an older era, but just they, I feel like some of these people were just like thinking about stuff because they were living it, and
yeah.
they probably weren't thinking about us, you know, living in 2020. But like, I feel like some of these texts that they left for us are very pertinent and very useful for how we navigate and think about how we're going to be either just people or artists, or just, you know, either one of those, or family members. So those are some early, I think, influences. And then, you know, as I got older, it, like, you know, I read a lot. I also see the mediums of theater, of film, of music. It just kind of all, I know they're different, but they all blend for me in terms of the influence and where I take
Yeah.
things from, you know. So in a given year, I might read a book that's influential, but the most influential piece of art might have been like the year I saw Moonlight, you know,
Yeah.
and there was a lot that was happening in that film, just in terms of the narrative, that I really respected, in the stories that it was trying to
Oh,
tell. But at the same time,
and
on a
yeah.
technical level, I learned more about editing and scene structure from that film than I did any book that I read that year. So,
Yeah,
you
beautiful.
know,
Yeah, so did you really, because music is a big part of your book, did you really play in the band? I mean, it's not
yeah,
fiction, so everything that I read, I was assuming was, true.
it it's true. It's all true. Um, yeah. I played music for about 20 years, like really intensely, particularly when I was living in California. That was kind of my high time for
Yeah.
being in bands, and it was a fantastic time. I learned a lot. So
Yeah, music is good. And there was a band in here. I think it was Velvet. I didn't write it. I think I highlighted it. But it was a series that just came out, and the shirt that Kerry Washington's character always wore was that same band, the Velvet
Velvet
Underground, maybe.
Underground.
Okay, yeah, because you really did show your vulnerability. You showed that I'm lost. I don't understand this, but I'm going to figure it out. And so yeah, that I'm glad you're going to keep, yeah, like you're saying, it's for you. It's for you, and then it can help people along the way who, like I said, they are seeking answers just like you, and then they can read and I feel the same way. I did the same thing. So awesome.
There's the question: how have the community changed? I think that happened a little bit ago.
Oh, when
Um,
we were talking about
when you
San
were talking
Francisco
about
change,
that, yeah.
How the communities changed.
How
I
have
couldn't hear you.
communities changed? That's Tinley Daniel. It was back
Um,
when I think it was a
well,
little bit back.
so I can answer that in terms of San Francisco, which we were both talking about earlier, which is the influx of money and capital to a relatively small amount of people has made it much more difficult for a larger amount of people to exist in the Bay Area, not just San Francisco, but Oakland and
Okay.
Berkeley. And, I mean, the whole thing, El Cerrito, Richmond, like it's all getting eaten up. And it's not like it's one person's fault. It's like some of it's development. People get good jobs. They want to live there. They want to go to the school. They want to have these nice things. But, and I understand that, but how can we be better is my question as, the body politic of a given town, and ensuring that it's just a more equitable landscape for everyone there, and understanding that the more the more different kinds of experiences that we have in a town, ultimately the better that town is going to be, the
Yeah.
smarter, the more empathetic. And for the people who are really worrying about the money, you're probably going to have smarter people who are making more money because everyone has just reached a different level of like presence and education and wants to live there. And so they might go get a fancy law degree somewhere, but they come back and they want to reinvest in the town that they grew up in. So it's, I don't know. These are huge problems, and I'm clearly not the only person in the world bringing them up. But going after living in San Francisco and then returning and seeing how quickly people have been turned away and turned out of that town,
Mhm.
um, was disconcerting. And clearly, lots of people are saying that, and lots of people are aware that, particularly the people who grew up there and remain there,
Yeah.
including some of my cousins. But it's that's what I was thinking about when I was thinking about community change in that particular instance.
And then I would like for you to talk about changes you've seen since you've been living in Iowa.
Yeah, so Iowa City, it's only one town in Iowa, but it's the cool thing is that it's, Iowa's like traditionally, or the stereotype for Iowa is like it's a very white place. But you start to see Iowa City, Des Moines, Davenport, and the Quad Cities are getting a little bit richer in their racial and ethnic backgrounds for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of our folk are moving from Chicago area. There's a number of folks from Mexico are moving here just because there's jobs and it's a way to just feed their families and build a life. And so I think the demographics are shifting here, and particularly in the more urban areas, they're shifting pretty quickly. And at the same time, there isn't that real, just quick influx of wealth that occurs in a place like Chicago or is happening in Detroit right now, where it just can't happen as fast because it's just a different sized community. And so I think not that things are all being done correctly here, but it gives a little bit more time to move in real time or in slow motion and think about how the city council and the city government makes decisions about how people are getting to school, what kind of public transportation there is, like real decisions that might seem boring to some people, but like actually determine what your community is going to look like in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Or in 30 years. And so I vote in all those things, right? And I'm embarrassed to say, I don't know if I would if I lived in Chicago. I might just be like just trying to like make rent and just trying to like,
Yeah.
but I've got like just a little bit more time,
Okay.
and a little bit more responsibility to do it, or pressure to do it. So I care about all those things.
I just want to say thank you to Andre for being in this virtual event, and Nairi for reading the book and bringing all of the insight that you brought to it and making it.
My pleasure. I don't know what's going on.
And so we originally wanted to have Andre in Detroit on the 9th, was it the 9th of May? And so it's just a little bit later in a different way, but we're very happy that we could make it happen. And the book is on our website. We both have our books on our website still, and we're just so happy that you brought to us personal essays. I know in bookstores we get a lot of short stories, we get a lot of memoirs these days, but creative nonfiction really makes us excited, and not only to hand sell it, but to want others to experience a read like this one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
I'm just grateful
wish you the
that
best.
we were able to get together.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. It's nice meeting you.
And I'm going to come to Michigan to come visit your store. When we're allowed to be in places again, I'm going to get my money together, and I'm going to come just buy out a bunch of books and support. I'm going to be there because I love what you guys are doing, and it like moves my heart and inspires me to just keep going, to know that you're creating that community where you are in the way that you're doing. It's amazing.
Awesome. And continue with your festival. Is that going to be virtual at all?
So we have two festivals. One we didn't do, which was supposed to be in the spring. And
Okay.
so couldn't do that one because of obvious reasons. The one in the fall, we're going to do a full virtual version, and it's going to involve writers and social justice workers and some musicians. We're going to do some cool stuff.
Okay. So we'll keep in touch so we can be there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
All right.
Bye, virtual world, Andre. Good job.